Hey art nerds! So today I'm going to talk to you guys about something that is a little bit off topic for this channel, but is also extremely on topic because it's something that I and a lot of other artists talk about. Today we're going to be talking about being an artist while living with ADHD, and I actually have a series of blogs, vlogs, etc. kind of planned around this, since so many of us live with this, so many of us create while ADHD, serve as small businesses while ADHD, pursue jobs and dreams and education and careers with ADHD. I cannot speak to any other career because I've not worked too many other careers, and I can't give you I'm not giving you medical advice. I am not a psychologist. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a doctor. I don't have a doctorate. If I did, it would be a doctorate in comics, not in medicine. So this is just me kind of sharing my personal experiences with you guys. And hopefully you guys can take something positive from it, because this isn't intended to be like a bunch of downers. It's not a woe is me. It's just me kind of sharing my life with you guys. And hopefully some of you will be like, hey, that sounds like me, and feel empowered to do the things that you need to do to make your life better. So today I just want to talk a little bit about my history with ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old, and the reason for that, so the way it often manifests in young girls is not the hyperactivity that people look for. It is kind of like the quiet daydreaminess. In me, it was kind of a combination of both. I'd been basically raised at a babysitter, and I'd been raised around boys. I'd been raised in an environment that had no structure, no rules, no set time for anything, and no toys. Stimulation came from us tearing things up, us fighting each other, and a lot of TV. So that was not a great environment to grow up in. And transitioning into going to school was a really hard adjustment for me. I went from nobody cares what you do, just don't die, to set times for everything. You can't talk for the majority of your day. You have to ask to go to the bathroom. You're expected to sit still in a desk for like 5-7 hours a day, right? Like, even if you just think about normal children transitioning into school, that's difficult. And my parents didn't do preschool. They didn't do anything like that. And the sitter they sent me to didn't even have chairs for the kids to sit in, so, right? So I had a really hard time transitioning into school and transitioning my behavior into school and coping with school. And my mom tells me that I used to come to the babysitter. She would pick me up from the sitters every day, and I would just be crying, super stressed out every single day. So she brought me into the pediatrician, and this must have been in like 1990, right? We're old here. And I guess I don't really remember a whole lot of this, but I also spent those years kind of in a fog. I can remember very intense emotions, but I can't remember specific events. But she tells me that I was tested, and I was like, ding, 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 very, very ADD. Now, that was back when we used to differentiate between ADD, attention deficit disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They've since been lumped into the same kind of single category, and that happened, I guess, about 4 years ago, or I found out about it 4 years ago. So I've started referring to myself as ADHD rather than ADD in that time frame, just to avoid confusion and to try and stay current. So that was not really a big deal when I was super little. It meant taking medication, and I don't actually remember the stages of what I've been on or the dosages. If you guys are super duper curious, I can call her later and get back to you guys, but I am not 100% comfortable talking about my medication history with people just because that's not really relevant to this. I'm also 110% not interested in someone troubleshooting whether or not I should be on medication, etc., or asking me to troubleshoot whether or not they should be. I will always recommend that you go talk to a paid medical professional who is your paid medical professional, not some friend of a friend, and get an accurate and official diagnosis. I'm just sharing this so that you guys can maybe either take comfort in knowing that you're not alone, or do what you need to do to improve your life. So I was on Ritalin / Concerta / Adderall from the age of 5 until I was 16. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I couldn't tell the difference between when it was working and when it wasn't. It felt like it was never working. I just got really good at hiding who I was. I got really good at like crushing that hyperactivity down, crushing my excitement over things down, just kind of stifling who I was until I got home. And then I would throw that energy into getting my homework done as quickly as I possibly could. And then I was outside, or then I was reading, or then I was just doing anything else, which is pretty normal for kids, I know. So I couldn't even tell you whether or not I felt like the medication was beneficial to me. I can remember having arguments with my parents over the medication, and I can remember having arguments with my doctor over the medication. He never, ever took me seriously. So I always felt like I never had a voice in my ADHD. And I always felt like it was growing up, this has changed and I've embraced it. I always felt like it was a negative stigma. So in Louisiana, in the 90s and in the early 2000s, if you had something, I don't want to call it like a mental disorder because I don't view it as such, but if you had a neurotypical, a not neurotypical brain, if you had some sort of learning disability, or if your brain was built differently, or if you needed accommodations, or if you were a gifted child, your parents and your teachers sat down and they came up with an IEP every year to address how they're going to deal with you as a student. And in most IEPs, the disclosing what that student is dealing with is like a big no-go. And like every year I'd have some teacher out me to the whole class in the most embarrassing way possible that I was ADHD. Now here's the thing. I was a straight A student up until high school. Like literally did not get B's. If I got a B, I would cry about it because I would be grounded for the week. Like I was an A student and I wasn't a problem kid either. If I finished my work early, I wanted to read or I wanted to draw. I did like talking in class and I was a little bit of a card, but I kind of figured out which teachers were cool with it and which ones weren't. And I didn't push buttons. So I was never this kid who like stood out as a problem. And I would finish my work really quickly because I was also a gifted child who has tested pretty well when it, you know, for whatever. I tested well. And I'm a good test taker. Like, I know how to school. My mom was a teacher. I grew up in a family of teachers. I know how to do school. Can't do life, but I can do school. So I would finish my tests really quickly. And this was always a problem for teachers who would be like, well, did you double check it? Yeah, I double checked it. Did you triple check it? Are you asking anybody else if they triple checked it? No, I'm not going to triple check it. Not that I ever answered that back. I was like, okay, fine. I'll go sit down and do it. But every year, some teacher would out me to the class about it. It would just come out like, you know you have ADHD or you know you're ADD. You know you have to double check things. And it's like, so my classmates, I mean, I was kind of weird. I won't lie. I'm still kind of weird. I won't lie. But I was always kind of treated as super weird and I had a really hard time making friends. So I was moderately outgoing as a kid, but I would try to tamper anything I was actually interested in because it was seen as being really weird. Like as a kid, I was into herpetology and I kept newts and I kept lizards and I wanted to go work for National Geographic and that was super weird, right? I don't think it's super weird, but it was super weird. My classmates thought I was super weird. And then I wanted to be a writer, which was a little less weird, but I wanted to write poetry, which made me super weird. Oh, Becca's that really weird cat lady girl. And then I wanted to make comics and be a comic artist, and it was just downhill from there. I became a big anime kid, and that was that, right? So, I think how my ADHD has affected my personality and how I see the world and how I deal with the world has been with me for as long as I've been able to make friends, like from the very start of school and before. I was probably born like this. So, it's definitely colored how I make friends now, and most of my close friends as an adult are other people with ADHD, usually other women with ADHD, because we communicate very similarly. I'm not really a big person for nuance. I'm not really a big person for subtleties. I'm not really a big person for manipulation. I'm not really good at mind games or following with mind games, and usually when I figure them out, I'm so disgusted with the person for wasting my time in my life, right? So like that has never really been me. So, you know, growing up, going to middle school, going to high school, being someone who wasn't into those kind of games and who was like very actively like, this is stupid, I'm gonna go watch Escaflowne or whatever. You know, that kind of ostracized me. And I'm not saying you should play those kind of games, but the fact that I had no problem just shooting off my mouth and being like, this is really dumb and y'all are really dumb, was not really good. My mom used to call it foot and mouth disease, and my nickname growing up was Wooden Spoon, because she thought I just liked stirring the pot, when really I would just say like exactly what I thought, and I really didn't have a very good filter. And those are all things that have bitten me in the booty so many times, and those are all things that, as I talk to women who have ADHD, I find that these are reoccurring themes for us. So I quit taking medication when I was 16. And the way it happened was my doctor refused to take me off of it, refused to refer me to another specialist like a psychiatrist or a therapist or a counselor or someone qualified to handle some of these things, wouldn't give me the referral, because I coped so well on the medication. So I just quit taking it, which I don't recommend you guys do. Don't do that. But my mom wouldn't listen to me, my dad wouldn't listen to me, my doctor wouldn't listen to me. So I quit taking it. And my grades stayed exactly the same. So when I was taking Ritalin, I couldn't put on weight. I weighed 60 pounds at the start of high school, and my doctor didn't think this was normal. TMI, like way TMI, I didn't hit puberty until I was like 15, right? It was really messing up my body. And the doctor I had at the time would not take those concerns seriously. And instead of referring me to someone who might have been a specialist in that area, he just kind of like was like, okay, time for the children to shut up, time for the adults to talk, right? And that is changing. Like, children's health care is really changing. Children's mental health care is really changing. I'm so happy for you guys, because my younger brother got way better care than I got. He's also ADHD, and he has some other health concerns too. And he's 5 years younger, and I swear he got way better care than I did. So I'm really glad to see that changing. So, you know, in that kind of situation, I was like, well, I'm going to quit taking the medication. And it didn't have any negative effect on me. And I know that's super unusual, and I am so hesitant to tell you guys about that, because I don't want you guys to be like, well, Becca did it, so I can do it. I would really, really try to impress upon your doctor, your parents, the people who love you, if you really don't think it's working for you, that it's not working for you. I mean, they had me on like 3 different medications. I'd been through the gamut. I'd done the generics. None of them made a difference in my life, which doesn't mean I wasn't ADHD. It meant that that wasn't the solution to me. So I make it sound like my childhood was really sad, but it wasn't. I have a mother who was a teacher. She has taught for like 25 years, 20 years at one school, and then 5 years doing reading, like not reading recovery, but reading support with young children. She is a phenomenal teacher. She is great. Not the greatest teacher for me for some subjects. She tried tutoring me in math, and that went really poorly, but she taught me how to sew, and she showed me how to cook, and I learned a lot from her. And when I was little, she was really good about, like, we're going to use planners, we're going to make lists. And she used planners, and she made lists, even though she swears she's not ADHD herself. She totally is. In fact, she's calling me right now, so I'm going to have to call her in a minute. But, in fact, I will decline. I'll call you later, Mama. But she presented the pattern for things, for how I should help organize my life, and that's been super, super helpful. And it was that patterning, that role modeling for me that helped me excel in school. Now see, as a little kid, we were given spelling lists, and I was in regular classes and I was in GT classes. And I don't know about you guys' GT experience, but when I was a kid growing up in rural Louisiana, you were expected to do the work for both classes, which meant I had 2 sets of spelling lists, 2 sets of vocabulary words, etc., etc. And this was a time when teachers thought writing the list by hand every week from the board in the last 3 minutes of class, oh, by the way, was like good character building, right? Because it would teach a first grader responsibility. You wouldn't believe how many Mondays my mom had to drive me back to school in tears. The janitor knew me very much by name because I'd forgotten to copy both of my spelling lists, or one of my spelling lists, or I'd missed half the words or something, right? Like, something was not clicking for me, and I could see everyone else I knew doing really well, and then there was me, Becca, always kind of just like wobbling along. It's like a car with like an oblong wheel, right? Ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. That was me. And that's still me. But now I'm okay with being the oblong wheel because I know there's other oblong wheels out there. So, kind of getting out of my small town, not being on the medication, but having a strong support system in terms of my parents, and then finding friends who had the same, were dealing with the same things I was dealing with, were huge for me. And something that I've noticed in art, especially in comics, I can't speak to anything else, is comics is full of women with ADHD. So in a way, it's amazing because lots of people I know are dealing with the same things I'm dealing with, and we just have to get comfortable talking about it with each other. In fact, Ink Drop Cafe, which is like the Discord that me and my friends started in our webcomic collective, Ink Drop is just, we've had some really wonderful conversations about living with this and how we accommodate for this and what works for us and what doesn't work for us and frustrations. So having a group of friends you can talk to, having a support group is phenomenal, and it is a huge help. So that was a little bit of history of me with my ADHD up until like high school when I quit taking the medicine. And then I did tell my mom. It wasn't like I just never told her. I think I gave it 6 weeks. My grades didn't change, and I was like, okay, Mom, I'm gonna come clean. I haven't been taking the medication. And she was like, well, we need to talk to your doctor about this. And he was just kind of like, well, did her grades drop? Literally, no. Is she happier? Did she put on weight? Has she hit puberty? Which I did because I quit taking medication. Nothing like that. Again, medical health for children has improved vastly. Okay, this is a different time period. You can trust your doctor. I could have probably trusted him if I could have just impressed upon him what was going on, but I couldn't. I couldn't get him to listen to me, so, you know. But I was happier. My grades had not dropped. I was able to put on the weight I needed to put on, so teachers weren't concerned that I was anorexic anymore. Things started to get a lot better for me personally once I got off the medication. Now, I think if support groups for children with ADHD had been a thing in the 90s, I think that would have, if I could have gotten past my preconceived notions, because it was like me and then everyone else I knew up until like high school who had ADHD, they were like, the kids I knew who had it, the kids who I knew who were like outed about it, were like seriously class disruptive people. Like couldn't sit still, had to interrupt the teacher all the time, were always going to the principal's office. So like, even as a kid, I had these preconceived notions that having ADHD made me a bad person, or it made me someone who had to be dealt with, right? And that's not true. Your brain is just built differently. You think about things differently. You process things differently. There are some wonderful benefits to being born this way, and there's some things that in our current society, there are no accommodations for us, so we have to make our own accommodations, and that's okay. And I'm going to talk about that in later videos. I just kind of wanted to give you guys some history. So I got through college, no problem, and then grad school. Grad school at SCAD happened, and it wasn't that the work was too hard, and I was only taking 2 classes a semester because I'd found that when I was taking 3, I wasn't retaining information. It was that I was taking classes, I kept getting injured, like I stepped on glass, and then I had a spider bite go necrotic, and I was working on my thesis, and I was doing all this volunteer stuff for SCAD, like tours and like editor's day, stuff like that, running errands for them. And then I did like 2 internships at schools, so I was responsible for that and lesson plans. And then I was also writing my thesis, and it hit a point where I think I overloaded my brain, and it was like too much. I was doing all the things that I'd been taught to do to compensate, and I was getting through, but I was angry all the time and sad all the time, just crying all the time, and I was miserable. I was seriously miserable, and I graduated. I finished. I have my MFA, and I kind of moved on to a different stage of my life, but I can't help thinking, now that I'm kind of alone in Nashville with not too many friends and not really a support group and no health insurance because Tennessee is not an ACA state and I'm self-employed, I can't help wondering if now is the time to find a support group or to get back on medication or to start looking into some alternatives, because the whole wobble wheel feeling, which is part of makes me who I am, is getting to the point where it's overwhelming and hate myself a lot, and I feel frustrated with myself a lot, and like I'm just not good enough, and I just can't enough, and then I'm like a puzzle piece that never fits into the puzzle, which all kind of ties in with two comorbid disorders that happen to be comorbid with ADHD, anxiety and depression. And those of you with ADHD, you probably know about this, and you probably know about the comorbidity. And it makes a lot of sense. When your brain is wired differently, you're going to feel anxious. If you have to constantly double check yourself to make sure you're not forgetting something, to make sure you're not late, if you have to set 6 alarms so you don't forget to leave at 10 so you can be there by 11, you're going to develop anxiety. And then conversely, when you're not successful, when it falls through, when, I don't know, the alarm doesn't go off because your phone died or whatever happens, you forget something, you forget your keys, you lock your keys in your car, even little human, normal people things, they feel like a huge failure because you've spent so much time trying to be normal and trying to be as good as everybody else. And I feel like in my ADHD journey, I've had to work twice as hard to get half as far. And maybe that's not true because I'm only living in my own head. I've never lived anyone else's life. I don't know how hard they're working to get to where they are, but I do know it feels that way, and it's exhausting to feel that way. And I also know that as a kid, for me, the medication wasn't the solution for that feeling. So I'm thinking maybe a support group could be the solution to that feeling, or a therapist who gets it can be the solution to that feeling. So I'm going to leave you guys this lengthy vlog. I'm going to leave you guys with some reading that helped change my life. And they're not a sponsor. I don't get a kickback. I just really love those books, and I recommend them to every friend I have who has adult ADHD. Because for some people it goes away, and for some people it doesn't. And for me, it didn't. Driven to Distraction is a phenomenal book. It's written by a psychologist. I believe it's a psychologist. He's either a psychologist or a psychiatrist who also has ADHD. A professional, like a serious business professional who helps people for a living with ADHD. So already you've got like a role model to aim for. Like, he did it. He did it. He did it. We can do it. We got this. And it's a great book. And it's full of insight, and it's full of like real moments of like, oh hey, that's me, and that person's a cool person, I could be a cool person. And it's full of solutions. There's also and I'm gonna link all of this in the description below because my ADHD memory isn't super great. So Driven to Distraction, Delivered from Distraction, which is sort of solutions to some of those problems. And then The ADHD Effect on Marriage. All 3 of those books are amazing, and they've been really helpful for me. And I'm currently reading some books directly aimed at women with ADHD because it affects us differently than it affects men, and there isn't as much research about how it affects little girls. In fact, little girls tend to be underdiagnosed because rather than the acting out hyperactivity, they tend to just be off in left field somewhere. Which, when I tell this to some of my female comic friends, they're like, oh yeah, that was me. I was drawing all class. I was just like off in my own world. So I hope this video has been helpful. I look forward to talking to you guys about it again. I have a feeling this series of vlogs is going to be all over the place because although I have like an outline of what I want to talk about, I'm not going to do notes. I'm just going to embrace my ADHD self and just be really real with you guys. So in the future, I'm going to talk about like just daily life challenges that living with ADHD presents. I'm going to talk about art-specific challenges, how I deal with conventions, how I deal with planning for things, how I deal with pitching things, all sorts of things. And if you have your own ADHD experiences and you're comfortable sharing them, I don't want to pressure anybody into anything they're not comfortable with, because 4 years ago, I would never have had the courage to do this, and I wasn't in a place where I wanted to share that aspect of my life. But now, I see how many people benefit when I talk about it, because every time I talk about it, there's like 5 people who are like, thank you so much. So I'm going to talk about it again. But if you feel like you're in a place, if you want to talk about your ADHD, you can reply with a vlog, or you can leave a note in the comments, or you can hit me up any way you're comfortable talking about it. I cannot promise you help. I am not going to help you. I cannot help you. I can barely help myself. I can recommend books, and I can listen to you, and that's all I can do. And if it's something you're struggling with, I sincerely think if you can afford to see a doctor that you should see a doctor. because self-diagnosis is not good, and laboring under a burden that feels like a burden, that you can't control, will grind you down. And I don't want to see anybody do that to themselves. And I'm trying not to do that to myself also. So hopefully this will be a good experience and not a negative experience. And I know there's still some discourse over whether or not it's real. So I don't want to hear anything about, oh, it's not real, or oh, you're just lazy, or anything like that, because, you know, whatever. This is not what this is for. This is not a discourse on whether or not ADHD is real. This is someone who has it, who has the paperwork to show that she has it, talking about her experiences with other people who may have it, who may have kids who have it, who may think they have it, or may have friends who have it. So this is not me proving, you know, here's the paperwork that shows that this is a real disorder. This is not that. This is just me being me, talking to you guys about something I deal with. So I'll see you guys again really soon, and hopefully we can talk about this and grow together. Bye, guys!